time to start thinking differently about how we allocate our space. It's not about anti-car or anything, it's about the re-democratization of our streets.
How we live in North America. And you know, that smiling face on the water tower is not what you think it is. It's not telling the people down there to have a nice day. It's the face of a wrathful deity looking down on us saying, you're a wicked people and you deserve to be punished.
Mike Bloomberg turned to me and he said, you know, I don't ask my commissioners to do the right thing according to the political calendar. I ask my commissioners to do the right thing, period.
Trudeau kind of grew up around rich, idiosyncratic, weird people. So he knows how to handle them.
And how do we take full advantage of the potential of this economic zone? And it's starting to think outside the municipal boundaries that are artificial to business and to our workforce. How do we make sure we've got seamless connectivity across, that we're developing policies that make it possible for people to live and transit out of smaller centers into other centers?
An epidemic of narcissism that we are seeing spread throughout several institutions.
We as the world fall down in delivering people assistance immediately. We're really good at talking about it. We're really good at saying, wow, that's terrible, but we're really bad globally at getting aid in immediately.
Good design also improves human behavior. I mean, we talked about it before, you know. Oh, those damn cyclists. You all thought it. We've all thought it. We have. Let's just shut up. We all have thought that.
It's time for us to make a change. It's time for us to do something to challenge ourselves and to also put our city back on the map and reclaim that title of the intelligent city.
Ani Bijot, and welcome. First of all, I'd like to welcome all of the people in this room to the territory of the Mississaugas of New Credit, and we welcome you. My name is Donna. My English name is Donna. My spirit name is Nuskose Nimkikwe. And when I was given that name, there was a gentle thunder rolling off in the distance, and what it translates to is beautiful sounding Thunder Woman. So I was very happy to receive that name. And today, that is who I am. Today we ask that and thank Creator for giving us this day, that we are here on Mother Earth. And we give thanks to our ancestors. They are always with us, and we invite them to come and join us. And we ask that the grandmothers and the grandfathers from the four directions come and visit us, for they are very much, again, a part of who we are. And the grandmothers and grandfathers come from the four directions, from the east, where life begins, from the south, where we enjoy the summer, and from the west, where we harvest. And Vince is going to fill in with his prayer after, and he will explain so many of those things that I am talking about. And in the north is a season that we're in, and it is a time that Mother Earth rests. She is resting, for soon the whole world will come to life, and it'll be a new rebirth of everything there is in the plants, the animals, the water, the fish, the birds, everything. So we are thankful for all of those. And today, one of my most important issues that I like to speak about is the water. When we came to this, our being, we lived in our mother's wombs in the water. And when we were born, the first thing that came was the water. And when we took our first breath of this air, the first thing we cried for was water. So I ask that each and every one of us honor, respect, and take care of the water, not only for this generations, but the future generations to come. It is that important. So today, I know you're not only here for today, you're going to be here for a few days, but I wish this organization and all the people who have come here a very successful meeting new friends, and just being a part of who you are and sharing. Miigwech. So do you want to talk about the smudge?
Bonjour. My spirit name is Chichakos. I come from the Eagle Clan, and I come from Shawanaga First Nation. My spirit name translates to He Who Understands the People. And when I received that name, then I understood why I was doing the work that I've been doing for a very long time. The smudging ceremony is a ceremony that we do at the beginning of our day, also throughout the day when we're struggling with any issues. I've had the opportunity to work in corrections for a number of years, develop and implement Indigenous programs inside the institution. And the smudging ceremony was one of the very first ceremonies that we were allowed to do in the prisons. And so we start our day with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come around to the left here because we're standing in the east. I'm going to come around all the way around. I did a smudging ceremony one time before at another event, and I asked if anybody wanted to smudge, and 500 people got up, and we were 2 hours late. So I'm not going to do that this time. I'm just going to go around and smudge the room.
And I can do that while you want to pray too.
Okay.
So we're changing roles. That's what people do. I'm going to go around, and Vince will do what he is best, very good at. Miigwech.
As you can see, there's a leader in every team, and she's the leader. And so I'll start with doing a prayer. We ask the grandmothers and grandfathers from the east where that eagle flies to come and join us in this conference today. We ask those grandmothers and grandfathers from the south where the turtle sits to come and join us in the circle. We ask the grandmothers and grandfathers from the west where that buffalo sits to come and join us. And we ask those grandmothers and grandfathers from the north where the bear sits. We ask our ancestors that have gone on before us to come and join us. And we ask those grandmothers and grandfathers from Mother Earth. We ask the spirits and the Creator to look after us during the workshop and to take care of everybody that is here. I say miigwech. So Donna's out there doing the smudging and going around, and so as far as we come from a small community north of Parry Sound. I was born and raised there. I had a career in policing for a number of years, and then I left the police force, and I had a bout with addictions, and I cleaned up from my alcohol, and I've been in recovery now for 34 years. And I believe that's why I started to work in the prison system to help Indigenous people to get healthier. And so I went to work in Sudbury Jail for looking for a job for 3 months, and 22 years later, I'm still around there. So during our time, I had the opportunity to organize programming, native programming, to help people to rehabilitate and to heal from the trauma from residential school and all the other things that happen to Indigenous people. And along that journey, I met my partner. She'll tell you that she enjoys doing the work with the Ontario Parole Board now. And we also work in the Sudbury Catholic School Board. We go in and do Indigenous programming with the youth in the school. For 17 years, I had a program reintegration program for Aboriginal youth coming out open and closed custody, in which we have an on-land lodge where we bring the youth for spiritual healing and reintroduce them back into their spirituality and their culture. And we're very grateful to be here. It was quite a journey to get the last 500 feet into the building, but we made it, and I only got lost a couple times in the elevators and looking for my room, but we're here, and I'm very grateful to Scott for inviting us, and I thank you very much, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 126th edition of the Ontario Good Roads Association Conference. I am Rick Kester, OGRA President, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome you back here to the Royal York. Please join me in thanking Vince Pavas and Donna Longlade of the White Buffalo Road Healing Lodge of Shawanaga First Nation for providing our welcome this morning. Should you have any questions, or if you're curious or want to learn more about what you heard or saw this morning, they will be in the Toronto room just outside here following this session. Now I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the New Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. As an organization, OGRA is committed to fulfilling its role in Canada's reconciliation efforts with Inuit, Métis, and the First Nation people. Before we go any further, if you wouldn't mind, please rising for the playing of our national anthem. Thank you. For those of you not familiar with the Fairmont Royal York, the conference is spread out over 2 floors, and finding the right room might be a little confusing. So to assist you in finding your way, please look for our conference ambassadors. They will be wearing a bright orange safety vest courtesy of AGO and holding signs looking very much like flag persons. They can help you find your way. Well, we are very pleased to be here today, and just to let you know, there are over between 700 or 800 municipal delegates that have chosen to attend OGRA this year, and we don't think you will be disappointed. The OGRA Board of Directors sincerely believes that this year's conference has something for everyone. Consult your smartphone app for latest and always up-to-date information. We have some great plenary sessions that will be informative, and the selection of 15 concurrent workshops and 8 technical briefing sessions, which will make it tough for you to decide which sessions to attend. And if that's not enough, our shift disturbers are back, which will be sure to pique your interest with their short but insightful talks. Our trade show is sold out, and we have 109 exhibitors with us this week who are excited to meet each and every one of you. Take some time during the next 2 days to visit them and learn what they have to offer. Also, be sure to check out our Asset Management Central. We have brought several organizations together in one area on the main mezzanine that specialize in asset management. Nowhere else will you find that much expertise in one spot. On some of the tables, we provided a charging station for your smartphones and other devices. Feel free to use them to get a quick charge. For the 6th year, we also held the Emerging Leaders Forum, which was yesterday. With our aging population, the gray wave will be transitioning out of the workforce, leaving a huge knowledge vacuum. We had over 35 students from across the province learning about the important work that municipalities do, and who knows, some of these bright young minds may be working for your municipality someday. I also want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Without their support, OGRA could not put on such a great conference. We would also not be able to do a lot of the things that we do for you over the course of this conference and over the year. All our sponsors are listed in your program. However, I want to draw your attention to just a few. Frank Cowan Company Limited, Enbridge Gas, Nuclear Waste Management Organization, the Municipal Engineers Association, Municipal World, Marmac Information Technologies, and the Workforce Safety and Insurance Board. Their participation and financial support to this conference is truly appreciated. Let's please give them a round of applause. Okay, before we move on to our first session, just a few housekeeping matters. As a courtesy, please, to our speakers throughout the conference, kindly just silence your phones. That would help everyone. If you would like to attend the OGRA's awards luncheon tomorrow, you may still purchase tickets in the registration area, Salon A, up until 4:30 today. Please plan to join our sponsor, Frank Cowan Company, for the Welcome Exchange reception Tuesday afternoon in the ballroom. This will be a great networking opportunity before heading out for dinner. Your name badge is your admission to all the sessions and workshops, and you should wear it at all times. Only delegates wearing official conference badges will be allowed entry into all the sessions. We would also draw your attention to the form printed on gray paper, which was given to you at registration. Our final word panel of municipal experts needs to be put to work. So please put your questions in writing and drop them off at the registration before noon tomorrow. Then come out Wednesday morning and hear the answer or advice on your issues. If you've not done so already, I strongly recommend that you download the conference app. The app has all of the conference information you can possibly need and works offline. If you're staying here at the Fairmount, you can get free Wi-Fi in your guest room. All you need to do is sign up for the Accor loyalty program. If you're not staying here, you can access free Wi-Fi on the lobby level. Okay, I would now call upon Chris Traini, County Engineer, County of Middlesex, and Chair of the OGRA Nominating Committee, to present the OGRA Nominating Committee report. Chris?
Thanks, Rick. Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to present the report of the OGRA Nominating Committee. Under Section 26 of the Constitution of the Ontario Good Roads Association, the Nominating Committee shall report to the annual conference its slate of 11 directors. The Nominating Committee placed the following names in nomination for a 2-year term. From the Northern Zone, Antoine Boucher, Director of Public Works and Engineering, Municipality of East Ferris. From the Southeast Zone, Chris Angelo, Director of Public Works and Environmental Services, City of Quinte West. From the South Central Zone, Brian Lewis, Councillor, Town of Halton Hills. From the Southwest Zone, Melissa Abercrombie, Manager of Engineering Services, County of Oxford. From the City of Toronto, Paul Ainsley, Councillor, City of Toronto, and Steve Kadama, Director of Transportation Services, City of Toronto. The following will also serve on the 2020-2021 OGRA Board of Directors. Rick Harms, President and Project Engineer, City of Thunder Bay. Dave Burton, First Vice President and Mayor, Municipality of Highlands East. Paul Schottman, Second Vice President and Mayor, Municipality of St. Charles. And Rick Kester, our immediate past president. Also serving as directors will be Akash Desai, Deputy Mayor, Municipality of Grey Highlands, Kelly Elliott, Deputy Mayor, Municipality of Thames Centre, Cheryl Fort, Mayor, Township of Hornpain, Donna Jebb, Councillor, Town of New Tecumseh, and John Parsons, Division Manager, Road Operations and Forestry, City of London. The nominating committee circulated its report to the OGRA membership and called for additional nominations. No additional nominations were received for the Northern Zone, South Central Zone, Southeast Zone, and the City of Toronto, and therefore the following are elected: Paul Ainsley, Chris Angelo, Antoine Boucher, Stephen Kadama, and Brian Lewis. Please join me in congratulating the successful candidates. One additional nomination was received in the Southwest Zone from Jonathan Graham, CAO, Director of Operations, Municipality of North Middlesex. As a result, an election will be held on Tuesday, February 25th, from 11:30 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. in Salon A, just outside the doors, at convention level. All delegates from member municipalities and First Nations are eligible to vote no matter where in Ontario your municipality is located. That will conclude my report. So I would like to welcome to the stage Kelly Elliott, Deputy Mayor, Municipality of Thames Centre, and OGRA Director.
Good morning, everyone. I am Kelly Elliott, Deputy Mayor, Municipality of Thames Centre, and OGRA Director. Just over a year ago, OGRA committed to enhancing road safety. This is a priority that addresses a lot of issues facing municipalities in Ontario. It is the top of mind for road authorities around the world, including the United Nations. I would direct your attention to the screens for this brief message from Jean Todt, the UN Special Envoy for Road Safety.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, today I applaud Canada for its long-term vision of making its roads the safest in the world, in line with international best practices on road safety. I'm certain that your government's long-standing commitment to this crucial issue will contribute to further reduction of fatalities and injuries, currently estimated at 2,000 and 165,000 respectively. Globally, this development issue claims 1.35 million lives every year and leaves 50 million severely injured, disproportionately affecting low and middle-income countries. The UN Secretary General's Special Envoy for Road Safety have been advocating for stronger political will, greater financing, and immediate action. Within my mandate, I have met with nearly 200 high-level officials, including 26 heads of states in more than 85 countries around the world. Aside from social consequences, poor road safety represents a huge economic burden, costing Canada, for example, $30 billion. I urge relevant Canadian stakeholders in Canada to improve safety of roads and vehicles, enhance law enforcement, educate road users, and advance post-crash care. I appreciate the efforts of Ontario Good Road Associations toward advancing the cause and bringing together local governments from across Ontario on this occasion today. I wish you a successful conference, and I look forward to being informed on its outcomes. Thank you.
It is my distinct pleasure to introduce our conference keynote speaker, Dr. James Orbinski. If I were to read his full biography, we would be here for quite a long time. So please take a moment to give a look at it in the app. First, a little context. Dr. Orbinski is a renowned researcher. He is a humanitarian, a nonprofit executive, a determined advocate, a best-selling author, the subject of an award-winning documentary. He is an educator and the inaugural director of York University's Data Lay Institute for Global Health Research. In November 1999, Dr. Orbinski stated, "Humanitarianism occurs when the political has failed or is in crisis." He said this when, as the president of Doctors Without Borders, he became just the second Canadian to ever accept the Nobel Peace Prize. These words are just as important today as they were back in 1999. Since then, Dr. Orbinski has started countless other initiatives to improve the quality of life of people around the world. He has also inspired countless others to dedicate themselves to the cause of humanitarianism. Recently, he has begun to explore how the big issues of the 21st century are affecting the communities that people build and live in. We are privileged to have him here today. Please join me in welcoming to the OGRA stage Dr. James Orbinski.
Thank you, Kelly. Thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Kelly, and thank you, Scott, and also Rick, for inviting me to be here with you today. I have to say, I'm thrilled to be here because, as Kelly has indicated, I've just in the last couple of years started to think very seriously about how do global forces, factors, and actors, how do they shape our individual and our collective responses to a changing world. So I've been asked today to give an overview of the global context. What's happening in the world, and why is this important to you as you consider a vision of prosperity for the future of Ontario municipalities? In my life, I've spent probably about 20 years working with humanitarian organizations, and largely Médecins Sans Frontières, Doctors Without Borders. And I've worked in war, I've worked in famine, I've worked in major epidemic diseases, I've worked in situations of genocide, and I've learned a great deal about how human beings organize themselves, how societies respond to crisis, how societies come into crisis, and how societies reshape their sense of the future. So what I've been asked to do today is to give a broad overview of major issues, of major forces, factors, and actors that are very much at play today and are shaping the context in which individuals and municipalities across Ontario and around the world must respond. And probably the single most important thing that I would say, if you just take away one simple little message, it's this: expect the unexpected. What is happening now in the world that has a significant impact here in Ontario, here in Canada, leaves us with situations where we're faced with, for example, municipal flood, where we're faced with pandemic preparedness, with the risk associated with major pandemic infectious diseases. And are we or are we not prepared? We also know, for example, that major technology-mediated disasters can occur. Recently here in Ontario, many of us will be deeply familiar with the emergency alerts that appeared on our mobile phones early one Sunday morning, telling us that there was a risk of a major radiation event in an Ontario nuclear reactor. We also know that large-scale systems can fail. I just remind people of the major blackout in 2003 that affected the entire eastern seaboard of Canada and the United States. So when we think about a vision for a prosperous tomorrow, I think it's extremely important that we ask, why are there such profound risks that are now at play? Why is the local so inextricably linked to the global? Why is it that decisions at a global level very much shape and influence decisions at a local level? And why is it that decisions at a local level will, in fact, shape the possibility of prosperity for the future or not? As I ask and as I go through my presentation to you, I just want you to think about two words. I want you to think about initiative, and I want you to think about intention. What is my intention? And what is the power of initiative? Keep that in mind as you listen and think through some of the things that I'm going to talk about now. So, from a global perspective, it's absolutely clear that the world is healthier. Over the last 70 years, the world is healthier. Life expectancy has gone up. Poverty globally has gone down. And child mortality from a global perspective has actually gone down. So over the last 70 or so years, we have seen massive improvements in human civilization, health outcomes. But this has come at a very, very serious cost. What we see is that there are very significant increases in carbon dioxide emissions over the last roughly 200 years. We also see that ocean acidification has accelerated. We also see that the volume of energy that we are using as a human civilization, and when I say that, I'm thinking from a planetary perspective, that the volume of energy, there's a massive increase in the volume of energy that we're using. We've also seen massive decreases in tropical rainforest, and also massive increases in freshwater use, and also massive increases in the use of fertilizer for food production. And we've also, probably the single most important fact, is that over the last 120 years, we have seen a 5-fold increase from a global perspective in human population. At the beginning of the 20th century, 1900, roughly, the human population on the planet was roughly about 1.2 billion people. Today, the human population on the planet is 7.6 billion people. We're adding 1 billion people to the planet every 13 years. That is utterly unsustainable. There is no way that our planet can continue to support the range, volume, type of human activity with that kind of increase in numbers of people. We have to fundamentally change the range, volume, and type of human activity so that we live in a sustainable way in relationship to our Earth. The other major change that has taken place, particularly over the last 250 years, is a massive urbanization. 250 years ago, 3% of the human population lived in cities. Today, it's 54% of human populations live in cities. By 2050, which is only 30 years away, 66% of human beings will live in urban settings, in cities. And they are not the shiny, glossy, gleamy, emerald cities of downtown Toronto. 50 to 75% of people today who live in cities live in slums, in barrios, and in squatter settlements that surround a highly centralized core where there is relatively good infrastructure. For those 50 to 75% of people who live around that core, there's virtually no formal infrastructure. This is a slum outside of Nairobi city, and what you see is a railway track going through that slum. That's the infrastructure. That's the only formal infrastructure. It's infrastructure that goes through people, through people's communities. It's not infrastructure that is part of people's communities. It's not infrastructure that actually serves the majority of people who live in urban and peri-urban environments. So if we look at this graph, what this graph shows is what I've just described. A massive increase, first of all, in human population overall, and then a massive change, a shift from rural to urban living. And what it shows is that this trajectory is virtually the future. This is not a stoppable trajectory. What does this mean in terms of human health? I'm not going to go through all of the issues, but I'll go through just a couple to give you a flavor. Pollution now kills 9 million people every year. That's 16% of all mortality, of all human mortality, is due to pollution. Air pollution accounts for 6.5 million deaths around the year, around the globe. That's about 60% of the overall mortality associated with pollution. Now, let me just, and 90% of this occurs in low and middle income countries. So this is an image of Delhi. So let me just put this in a very concrete perspective. The single highest cause of mortality in Canada is cardiovascular disease, heart attack and stroke. We take many medicines for heart attack and stroke. We take anti-cholesterol lowering agents, we take blood pressure lowering agents, we modify our diet, we modify our exercise regimens, and so on and so on and so on. 33% of the causality that is associated with cardiovascular disease, with heart attack and stroke, is due to air pollution. Air pollution causes little microparticulates that are inhaled. Those particulates are inhaled into your lungs. They move from your lungs into your arteries. They scar your arteries. Your body creates an inflammatory response. That inflammatory response causes tightening of the arteries. That tightening of the arteries leads to high blood pressure. The scars also become points where plaques and lipids collect. Those then become the source of heart attack and of stroke. So air pollution is not a minor problem. It is a problem that can be solved, and it is a problem that has massive, massive health impacts. 33% of all cardiovascular disease is directly attributable to air pollution. Now that is a profound piece of information. Think about, as well, implications for asthma and for chronic obstructive pulmonary disease and other health conditions. We also know globally that inequality around the world is growing. This graph, you don't have to read it in great detail, and don't read any of the graphs in great detail, but just look at them for the overall picture. This graph shows, essentially, that, for example, if you take the green bar on the end, 61% of the overall gross domestic product in the Middle East sits in the hands of just 10% of the population. So what this means is there's a massive increase of wealth in the hands of fewer and fewer people. And when wealth accumulates in the hands of fewer and fewer people, there are more and more people who are impoverished. More and more people who are poor, who have less and less disposable income, who have less and less financial prospects in society, and less capacity in society. And we also see this graph, you can see ups and downs essentially across regions of the world: India, the United States, Russia, China, and Europe. What this graph shows essentially is that not only is inequality among people rising, but there are different rates across different societies. And so that means, very concretely, that institutions and policies and practices of governments, municipal, provincial, and federal, that these actually matter. They matter enormously to the degree to which wealth is evenly distributed around society. Another major issue, to put the global context front and center. 6 million people fly every single day around the world. By the end of 2020, 4.7 billion flights will have taken place. That is an unbelievable amount of activity, of human activity. Every single day, 6 million people are up in the air. Think back to 120 years ago. Airplanes were simply not a form of transportation. The type and the means by which human beings moved were much slower. Think about one of the major epidemics of the early part of the 20th century, the Spanish flu. The Spanish flu took between 50 and 75 million lives around the world. The Spanish flu was largely distributed around the world by soldiers returning from World War I. The pace at which they returned was fundamentally different from the pace at which human beings move today. Imagine 6 million people moving around the world every single day by air. This is a very different world. The ecological footprint of human activity over the last 250 years is so profound that we now call this period of time, this period of the last 250 years, we call this the age of the Anthropocene, the age of humankind. And this is a period of geological, environmental, and biological transformation of the planet. And it is being transformed by us. We are fundamentally altering the nature of nature. We've crossed, I'm not going to go through this in great detail, but if you think about the planet and the biosphere as a series of systems, these systems can be divided into roughly 9 systems. We have already crossed the planetary boundaries of 3 of those 9 systems, and we are well on the way to crossing 2 more. All of our models of what the world will look like in terms of, for example, climate change, all of our models have not, and as yet cannot, account for multiple feedbacks and for multiple changes across these systems. We see massive threats to biodiversity. This is the pine beetle. We know that across northern Canada, from British Columbia all the way through to Nova Scotia, we know that the incidence of forest fires is increasing. Why is that happening? Well, that's happening because this beetle is spreading across the country and killing trees. When a tree is dead, it's dry. And in the context of increased lightning, secondary to climate change, lightning with dead trees means fire, by definition. Why is this beetle proliferating? This beetle is proliferating because the larva of the beetle is normally killed off in large numbers in the winter when temperatures are extremely cold. Well, with climate change, we're just simply not reaching those temperatures to the same degree that we did even 20 years ago. And so the pine beetle is proliferating. And you can see in the image vast swaths of dead forest. And this is occurring now across Canada. And with this, again, a massive increase in the number of forest fires. We also see, let me just have a little sip of water here. Also, with the kind of activities that humans are engaging globally, trade, travel, communication, urbanization, increased population, increased demand on resources of the planet, we also see the emergence of new, what we call complex ecologies. And with that comes the introduction of new diseases into the scope of human activity. We see Ebola, we see Zika virus, and now we see coronavirus. I'm happy to go into the details of this and how complex ecologies and human activity create new circumstances where there is major risk of pandemic disease. This is unavoidable. There is no bubble that you can enter to protect yourself from the ecology that we are part of. And I think one of the key things that we must understand is that the idea that we have dominion over the earth, this idea, we have to let it go. We have to come into relationship with our biosphere. We have to come into relationship with our earth. We have to come into relationship with the various forms of life and the various forms of activity that are the garden in which we grow. If we kill our garden, we kill ourselves. If we don't alter the way in which we behave, my view, the garden will continue. The question is, will it continue with us or without us? That's the only question. Life is life. Life has come into being and is thriving and prospering on this beautiful planet. We're only one form of life. And we need fundamentally to understand that and understand that how we behave, how we participate, how we become part of and recognize with a very high degree of humility, recognize our place in a complex ecology. This is fundamental. This is fundamental to a prosperous vision of the future. This is an image of coronavirus. I'm not going to go through the epidemiology of coronavirus, but there is the big difference between coronavirus and other coronaviruses. The big difference between COVID-19 and MERS or SARS, both of which are coronaviruses. The big difference is the infectivity rate. So it infects a lot more people. It's more virulent in that sense. So it has a higher probability of infecting a larger number of people relative to SARS or to MERS. And MERS is Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. We know a lot about SARS, particularly in this city. We learned a lot about SARS and how to deal with pandemics. And that's why I'm very confident in our public health system. I'm very confident in our clinical public health capacity to understand, manage, engage, contain, control, mitigate the COVID virus. I'm very confident in our system. But that doesn't mean that we won't have infections in our society. The big difference between COVID and other coronaviruses is, number one, infectivity, and number two, mortality. So COVID is more infectious, but there's a lower mortality rate. But there is a mortality rate, and I think that's important to recognize. The mortality rate associated with SARS, 9.6%. The mortality rate associated with COVID, about 2 to 2.3%. The mortality rate associated with MERS, Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, also a coronavirus, 35%. The mortality rate associated with Ebola, 50 to 90%. But the infectivity is lower, and the means of infection, of contagion, are slightly different. So I tell you these things really to give you a sense of the complexity of the world in which we live. Epidemic disease and pandemic disease are virtually unavoidable in the world in which we live. Again, imagine 6 million people moving around the world every single day, in the air alone, let alone local, national movements. We also know, when we think about the environment and we think about climate change, the evidence of climate change is absolutely unequivocal. If you follow this graph, it goes up and down, up and down, up and down. Up and down, up and down, up and down is normal variation of carbon, of atmospheric carbon over the last 650,000 years. So this is called, in my view, this is called climate change. So there's a normal variation as climate changes over time. That happens seasonally. It also happens over 650,000 years. This is the evidence that we've collected. But global warming is very different. It's not climate change. It's in addition to normal climate change. You follow this graph, you come to the end of the graph, and you see 1950. At 1950, there's a massive spike and increase in greenhouse gas emissions and carbon emissions. This is where we are now. And this is what is driving global warming. Now, carbon is one, as we all know, is one of several greenhouse gas emissions, but it's the major one. We're well beyond our carbon emission targets, and this means that, for example, the permafrost in the Arctic and the Antarctic, that this is actually melting, that our Arctic has lost 40% of its ice cover in the last 15 years. 40%. That is a profound, profound change in the ecology, in the life cycle of our planet. What are some of the risks that are associated with that? Well, buried in permafrost are microorganisms that were active in prior periods of time. We don't know what they are. We don't know their degree of pathogenicity, as we call it, their ability to cause disease. We know nothing about their infectivity, about their mortality rate, and so on and so on and so on. So the permafrost is not simply, a minor sort of thing. It's a big deal. And the changes that are taking place in and on our planet are absolutely fundamental. And we must understand, perhaps not the actual detail of each change, but we must understand two things. We need a new understanding of how to be in relationship to our biosphere. And then number two, that expect the unexpected. There will be many, many, many changes in the coming years. This is a graph of our global warming projections. The blue basically shows what our current policies, where that will lead us. Our current policies will lead us to roughly a 2.8 degree warmer world by 2100. That's well beyond the 1.5 target that our politicians talk about. But that's where we're heading under our current policies. That's assuming that we actually implement those policies. But if you look at the gray area, that's based on current fossil fuel usage and on current greenhouse gas emissions, which are accelerating. They're not going down. They're actually going up globally. And so there are now many serious scientists who are deeply concerned and who have declared that we are in a climate crisis. And again, this is not, these are not the words of fringe activists. These are the words of people like me, who are extremely conservative in terms of science, in terms of knowledge, in terms of how we approach our understanding of the world. There is a virtual consensus among scientists, people like me, that this is where we're going. We are in a climate crisis. The gray suggests that we may actually see, by 2100, a world that's 5 to 7 degrees warmer than it is now. Now, this has just almost unimaginable implications for us as human beings. We already know that the incidence, again, just look at the curve, the slope of this graph. This graph shows us the incidence of extreme weather events from roughly 1950, well, from 1950 to 2012. There's a hockey stick shape to that graph. And that hockey stick we're just at the beginning of the curve of that graph. So it's going to become even sharper in terms of the number of extreme weather events that we are going to see around the world. What does this mean? Well, Fort McMurray, wildfires. The BC interior, wildfires. It also means a massive increase in hurricanes, in atypical precipitation. When I think about climate change and implications, or global warming and implications, meteorologic implications, I just think very simply. I think about heat, I think about water, rain, or seawater, or flood, or fresh water. So I think about heat, water, and wind. And what we will see, we are seeing, is massive increases in extreme weather events in terms of floods, drought, hurricanes, tornadoes, wildfires, heat waves that affect human beings, and so on and so on and so on. What else is happening in the world? Well, after World War II, there was a shift in the idea of power. After World War I, after after the Great Depression, after World War II, and the totalitarianism of World War II, Russian and German totalitarianism, and Japanese fascism, Spanish fascism, Italian fascism, and the concentration camps and the Holocaust of World War II. The world, under American leadership, created the United Nations. It was a very different conception of power. The basic idea was that every single human being, the dignity of every single human being, is at the center of all of our political calculus, and that everything that we do politically should be oriented towards incrementally building a world that honors, respects, and enables the dignity of every single human being. That's the root of the United Nations Convention. There were several conventions that came with that, and that created an international system of institutions, the United Nations system, United Nations, the World Bank, and the IMF, and the GATT, the General Agreement on Trade and Tariffs, and then the World Trade Organization. That created a series of institutions that built, in principle, a liberal international order. Well, that system is fundamentally at risk. This is the cover of Time magazine from last year. Remember that it was American leadership and its allies, including Canada, that built that international system, that conceived and that actually constructed the United Nations international liberal order, as we call it. Well, that system is fundamentally changing now. We're in a very different world. We're in a world where that order is in crisis. John Eikenberry is the guru of international relations. He's one of there's several who can claim that mantle, but he's one of the gurus of international relations. And he has said a year and a half ago that the international order built and led by the United States and its partners is in crisis. The world that we live in today is a multipolar world. It is not a bipolar world of the Cold War. It is not a unipolar world of American hyperpower post-Cold War. It is not a world where that system, that international system that led to relatively stable trade and relatively stable international relations, that system is very much at risk. We have a multipolar world now with multiple centers of power. We have China, Russia, Brazil, India, each, and then regional blocs, each competing for economic power and or military power in their region. So this means that the world we're in is very different than the world of even 10 years ago. And I just remind people of the international financial crisis of 2008. The international financial crisis in many people's minds was really the point at which the formal international order that I've talked about here, that order under American leadership simply dissipated. With the international financial crisis of 2008, $17 trillion of public money was mobilized to underwrite the banks and the international financial architecture to prevent a global collapse of the global economy. Now, whether you agree with that or not, it doesn't matter. In my mind, I think of what the world could have looked like had there been a global collapse of the global economy. It would be, in terms of human impact, think of the Great Depression on steroids. It would have been absolutely devastating. So where are we? Well, the World Economic Forum, for whatever you think of it, left, right, doesn't matter. The World Economic Forum does many things, but it does at least one thing right, in my view. It puts out a global risks report every year. And this report is largely recognized around the world as one of the most, if not the most authoritative public report on global risks. There are many other reports. The Pentagon has its own report. Every major military in the world has its own approach to risk analysis. Every major intelligence service has its own approach to risk analysis. And these are all secret. But this isn't secret. And this is based on consultation with about 2,000 academics, policymakers, CEOs, government leaders, major policy thinkers around the world. It's a deep consultation with each of these people every single year. I'm one of the people that they consult, and I know I have a high degree of familiarity with their methodology and how they actually do this. And I can tell you, in my opinion, it's a highly, highly accurate methodology. It's not perfect. It doesn't give you perfect predictions. Nobody has an actual crystal ball. But it gives you very clear trends. And typically, if you look at the last 15 years of the report, it's been quite accurate. So what does it do? It breaks down risk into a series of categories. So economic, environmental, technological, and a couple of others. But the ones that I want to emphasize for you I'll come to in a minute. It basically breaks this down into onto two axes. It looks at what's the likelihood of a particular risk, and then what's the impact of a particular risk. And then it comes up with a grid. And so on one side is impact, and then on the bottom is likelihood. Well, the area that we're most concerned with is in the upper right-hand corner. This is high likelihood and high impact. And what is really important to see here, without going into specific detail, is that 5 of the top 10 risks for the next year and for the next 10 years are all environmental. And these are risks to the global economy and to global stability. So the top 10 risks that are expected to actually increase over the next year, I don't expect you to go through this, but just look at the green. And what we see here is that there's a very significant number of green risks. And these are extreme heat waves, destruction of natural ecosystems, and uncontrolled fires. And then there are also, in red, social risks. So in red, we have domestic and political polarization, and we have populist and nativist agendas, which, when you think about the interaction of those two, that means that how we approach change, our intention, how we engage our communities really, really matter. The other thing I just want to point out is that we are in the middle of a major, major technological or digital revolution. Some people call it now the 4th industrial revolution. So the first was the steam engine, the introduction of the steam engine. The second was the widespread use of machinery and manufacturing, for example, and electrification. And then the third was very recently, and in this room, we will all remember it, the first introduction of computer-based activity. This was 1969-ish. And here we are today, and we are in the middle of a next revolution. And it's the revolution in cyber-physical systems, the Internet of Things, and of integrated human-machine activity. So we hear a lot of discussion around artificial intelligence. We hear a lot of discussion around smart cities. This is the revolution now that we are entering, and it is genuinely transformative. It means very concretely, in this room, the idea of smart cities. What is a smart city? It also means, very concretely in terms of this room, the Internet of Things and the integration of human choices with machine activity and machine capacity. It is, in the minds of many people, probably one of the most transformational times in human history. And yet, I just want to point out that we live in a divided world. Life expectancy in 2011, life expectancy in Canada and the United States was 80 years. Now it's 82 for the average between men and women. Average person will live, a person born today will live on average to age 82. In South Africa, it was 40. Now it's about 42, 43. So life expectancy in the developing world, if I can make such a sweeping generalization, is almost half of what it is here. Now that is driven by the societal determinants of health, by the structures and functions and institutions and ways and means by which people live, work, organize, and play. So again, your intention and how you engage the building of your community, this fundamentally matters. It's not by accident. It's also not simply a technological outcome. We decide what technologies we build. We decide how we use technologies. And we decide how we allow technologies through our hands to shape our communities. We pick up those tools and we build with those tools. Our intention really, really matters. Globally, we're seeing, in terms of the changes that I've described, globally we're seeing massive decreases in crop yields. And projections over the next 30 years suggest that, for example, in Africa alone, crop yields will fall by as much as 50%. In the southern region of Africa where I work, I have a number of research programs and initiatives in Malawi and in the southern region of Africa. There are currently 14 million people on World Food Program assistance because crop yields are failing. And crop yields are failing because of climate change, because of major changes in precipitation, water. You have the same volume of rain, but rain comes in shorter, more intense bursts. And then you have these long periods of dryness, of drought. And in that dryness, the soil gets very, very hard. The rain falls, the soil is hard, flood. And flood wipes out villages, it wipes out infrastructure, and so on and so on. And so this is not the future, this is now. In 2017, there were 4 famines across Africa. Every single one of them was climate change induced. In 2011, there was a climate change induced famine that left 500,000 people in East Africa dead. Now, we didn't really hear too much about that, but that's the reality. Now, whether that is in Africa or in Central America or in Asia, we're seeing massive impacts in terms of crop yields. We're also seeing massive impacts in terms of migration. People are moving. If you cannot feed your children, you will move. I would move. People are moving. People are moving inside their countries, and they're moving across borders. We also know that climate change was a major factor in catalyzing, not the only factor, but a major factor in catalyzing the Syrian civil war. Drought in the northern part of the country meant crop failure. People from the north moved to different parts of the city, to different parts of the country. Assad was like Tito in the former Yugoslavia, a strong man who held complex multiple identities, ethnic identities, together in a coherent political structure. When people move because of famine, that destabilized that political structure and civil war. And that is a pattern that is increasingly frequent. People think about Darfur, and we think about this as a place of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and so on. All true. Yes, war crimes, crimes against humanity, slow motion genocide, absolutely true. But why? Because of the desertification of land, and because of less and less access to potable water, less and less access to land that you can grow food on. And when you cannot feed your children, and when you are threatened, you will go to your natural, to the place where you feel most protected. And in Darfur, that is your ethnic group, it's your religious group, that is your community. So this is a pattern that we're seeing more frequently. We also see that conflict is regional, is borderless, it's porous, and it has global impacts. I won't go through this in detail, but there's more refugees now than at any time since World War II. And the number is going up. It's not going down. I'm going to just close with a couple of thoughts for you. So when you think about a prosperous tomorrow, it's absolutely vital that we think very, very deeply about a new way of being in relationship to each other, but also a new way of being in relationship to our biosphere. We fundamentally must alter the way that we are in relationship to our biosphere. The way we have been behaving, unsustainable. It is not going to be a pretty future if we continue. Last thought. What is our intention? What do we want for the future? Do we want a prosperous, thriving human community? I think the answer is yes. If we want a prosperous, thriving human community, we must be very clear about how we are going to achieve that. It requires a different way of seeing, a different way of being. And then finally, it also requires initiative. We cannot wait for somebody on high to tell us what to do. You are literally at the very, very starting point of our prosperous future. You as municipal leaders, as elected municipal leaders and as staff and executives, you are the people who are most in relationship to the people in your communities. You are also the people who are most in relationship to the provincial authorities and the federal authorities. And you are the people who are most capable of actually crafting that new way of being. And it does require initiative. Don't be afraid to try. Don't be afraid to experiment. Not everything will work, but most things will work if you have the right intention. A prosperous vision for tomorrow is absolutely possible. It's absolutely possible. But we need a new way of being in relation to each other, and most importantly, a new, more humble way of being in relationship to our biosphere. Thank you.
So thank you very much. You gave us lots to think about as we build and plan our future and our municipality. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
So our first shift disturber is Kathleen Law. Kathleen is the Integrated Conservation Manager for Pollinator Partnership Canada. As a pollinator specialist focusing on collaborative approaches to conservation, she has worked with the energy industry, farm organizations, and municipalities to integrate pollinator conservation with other land uses, such as energy generation and infrastructure. Kathleen will be speaking about the importance of pollinators and their basic principles of roadside management. Please give a warm OGRA welcome to Kathleen Law.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Kathleen Law with Pollinator Partnership, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you today, and a real honor to be speaking after Dr. Orbinski. And I'd like to humbly offer a small piece of the solution that he's all called us to act on. So essentially, I'll be talking about how we can manage roadsides for pollinators. And in other terms, I essentially want to speak to how we can turn gray infrastructure into green infrastructure. Oops. Or how we can go from this to this, as well as why we will want to do that. So we all know that pollinators play a key ecosystem function. They allow flowering plants to reproduce. Without them, our world would look drastically different, and we ourselves would be materially different, because 1 in every 3 mouthfuls of food that we eat is dependent to a certain extent on their pollination services. And these tend to be the most nutritious foods. So our produce choices with bees and our produce choices without bees. Sadly, we also know that pollinators, like much of the natural world, as Dr. Orbinski has described, they're facing serious challenges. The monarch butterfly, for example, has seen population losses exceeding 80%, and that's in only the last 25 years. And if today I'm talking to you about roads and pollinators and how they can intersect, it's largely because of the monarch. So this butterfly species has a very unique cross-continental migration. They start off in Mexico, and over the course of a few generations travel all the way to Canada each year. And so as scientists realized how drastically their populations were shrinking, it became very obvious that we cannot rely simply on nature reserves and national parks to protect nature or to help the monarch butterfly. We really have to start thinking outside of the box. What we have to do is reintegrate nature into our human systems and reintegrate nature into our working landscapes. And this is why rights-of-ways have been identified as a priority. So rights-of-ways, roads, utility corridors, rail lines, they are these large areas of land under single management regimes, and they have the capacity to connect existing habitat. So we usually think of roads as scars on the landscapes, at least from an environmental perspective. And as road managers, you might only be thinking about plants when you either have to cut them or when they've become a serious problem. And that is what Lanark County in Eastern Ontario was dealing with. So they had a very serious wild parsnip infestation. And in 2015, they decided to start boom spraying herbicide. So I'm an ecologist. I can tell you that is not a good idea for many reasons, but not least of which is that it creates a lot of public opposition. Fortunately, there are better ways of managing plants along roads, and the technical term, which you're probably familiar with, is integrated roadside vegetation management, and to that we add for pollinators. So there are 2 key points I'd like to share with you about this approach, and the first one is to reduce mowing, and the second one is to proactively enhance habitat. So outside of our clear zones and our sight lines, mowing is hardly necessary. Most of the time, you really don't need to do it. When you mow, you're preventing flowers from blooming, which means you're taking a food source for pollinators out of the landscape. You're also cutting down the vegetation in which they nest and they shelter, and the very act of mowing causes mortality. When we reduce mowing, we have the capacity to just let habitat happen where it wants to anyways. You also save money by reducing your maintenance costs, and you reduce your carbon emissions. To reduce mowing is possibly the single most effective and easy change to make that has the biggest impact. Oops, sorry. The second habitat principle is to enhance proactively. And what this means is to really seize the opportunities as they come up in routine operations. So the most obvious examples, of course, are when you've done roadside construction or maintenance, and you're going to be reseeding anyways. So this is an opportunity to move away from your conventional non-native grasses to a highly biodiverse mix of native wildflowers and grasses, and where appropriate, even trees and shrubs. So this is going to look different whether you're dealing with a county highway or a suburban median, but there are lots of opportunities to think about these plants and to create this high quality pollinator habitat. And this is what it looks like. So this is Highway 40 in Lambton County in southwestern Ontario. This is Ontario's oldest prairie highway. And as you can see, it's quite beautiful. But there are also other benefits, one of which is the potential for crop pollination by sustaining a resident population of bees and other pollinators. You're also creating a sense of place, which might be a bit of an intangible value, but one that's nevertheless important for drivers and for residents. This is that same highway 6 months later. So on the left picture, you see a portion of Highway 40 that's not especially planted with anything, and it's regularly mowed. It's under conventional management. To the right of it, this is the same driver, just 1 minute down the road, a few hundred meters. You have your pollinator planting, and it's unmowed. So there are some clear implications from having this living snow fence, both for maintenance as well as for safety. There are many co-benefits to managing roadsides for pollinators. And what this looks like in terms of the environment and for agriculture is that these species that are typically used in these enhanced habitats have really deep root systems. So Kentucky bluegrass, your typical lawn species, has a root depth of only a couple of inches. These species, their roots extend 6, 8, 12, even up to 15 feet. So this has clear benefits for preventing erosion, for water infiltration, so that helps you manage your stormwater load. And of course, these roots sequester a lot of carbon. They increase soil organic matter. And when you're actively planting these biodiverse mixes, you're directly increasing biodiversity at the plant level, and this has domino effects through the web of life. As a road manager or as a road authority, you also will see some direct benefits to yourselves. And these are largely in terms of cost savings. So of course, when you reduce mowing, you're reducing your maintenance activities and costs. By moving away from broadcast herbicide use to more targeted uses, you're reducing your product costs, and over the long term, you're reducing your costs there as well. Managing roadsides with a view for habitat, you're also decreasing the opportunities for noxious plants invasions, and you're reducing your costs, again, from preventing erosion and stormwater issues. And this is an approach that's becoming increasingly common in the States, and so we have data to look at. And so, for example, just last year, the Ohio DOT, one of the largest in the States, had seen savings of over $2 million annually. There are also more intangible benefits that I've alluded to, and these are largely from public support. When you, as a road manager, are helping pollinators, when you're creating habitat, you have a really positive story to tell. This is something that helps you connect with residents, it helps you engage people, and it helps enhance community relationships. It can be as simple as putting a butterfly meadow sign, "Please do not mow," alongside a roadside, but it can also look like much more proactive engagement, and there are lots of opportunities for this. To manage roadsides as pollinator habitat really is a triple bottom line proposition. You have economic benefits, you have social benefits, and of course you have the environmental benefits. I've glossed over pretty much all of the technical details, but there are lots of resources available out there, including some guides published by Pollinator Partnership. We've also launched a Pollinator Steward Certification. This is an intensive 2-day workshop for professional land managers, and this is to give you the tools to integrate these management approaches into your routine operations. And finally, I want to circle back to Lanark County. So the North American Pollinator Protection Campaign each year awards both one county and one state or a province with a Pollinator Roadside Management Award. And in 2019, Lanark County became the very first Canadian recipient of this award. And to echo Dr. Orbinski, with your innovation and with your intention, I hope they will not be the last. Thank you very much.
Kathleen, thank you so much for your efforts in conservation.
My pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
Good morning. My name is David Burton. I'm mayor of the municipality of Highlands East and OGRA second vice president. Laurie Scott is MPP for Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes and Brock, and Ontario's Minister of Infrastructure. She was born and raised in Kinmount and has been elected to represent Central Ontario riding of Haliburton, Kawartha Lakes and Brock 5 times since 2003. For 15 years, Laurie's been a strong advocate for issues facing rural Ontario. Last fall, she passed legislation to protect rural fire halls and promote public safety in small communities by ending the unfair prosecution of double hatters. She's also made key labor reforms that have spurred job creation across the province. Please welcome to Ontario Good Roads Association stage for the first time, the Honourable Laurie Scott, Minister of Infrastructure.
Morning, everybody. Hi, Dave. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Dave, for that kind introduction and not telling too many stories from home about me. I really appreciate that part. But I want to thank the Ontario Good Roads Association for inviting me here today. There's a saying that starts off with all roads lead to Rome. Well, I would suggest that here at this conference, we know all good roads lead to OGRA. So with that in mind, this morning I want to talk to you about the long and winding road we are on together, the road that is the rebuilding of Ontario's infrastructure. And I want to ask you this question. Are your shovels ready? Come on, you guys, I can't hear you. Are your shovels ready? Because if they're not, they should be. When the winter finally leaves, and today I think it left, for a minute anyway, I want us all to have our shovels ready. Our Premier, our entire caucus, including myself, are working as hard as we can so that in every part of our province, we can share in the coming infrastructure boom. We know that dollars are stretched to the limit. We know that tough decisions are being made, but we also know that each of you care so very much about all your communities. Whether you represent the hardworking people in your community as an elected official, or you manage its infrastructure assets, or you wear both hats. We know that you, like us, are doing the very best that you can. And when it comes to wearing both hats, I know something about double hatters, as Dave has alluded to. It may seem like a long time ago, but it was November 2018 when, as Labour Minister, I introduced legislation to help a long-standing issue facing small and rural municipalities. Local fire departments and municipalities in Ontario have been asking for protection for double hatters for a long time. I had personally been advocating on this issue for over 14 years. And as Minister of Labour, I was thrilled to finally have the opportunity to protect those heroes from unfair punishment and empower them to voluntarily serve their communities and help save lives. I was proud to be in Minden, in Omimi, and many places across the province to bring that in. And doing that, this helps to build stronger communities across our province. And that is why our government and I, as your Minister of Infrastructure, are building on that legacy. And that legacy is our government is here for you. We are in your corner. We are on your side. We are getting our shovels ready, making sure we have reliable roads and bridges so we can get to work and return home safely. We are all building Ontario together. Simply put, you are helping to build a more prosperous Ontario. Premier Ford and our government recognize that modern and reliable infrastructure is what drives our economy. We know that investing in new projects and upgrading infrastructure creates wealth, increases productivity, and creates jobs. We also know that our government must work closely with all of you to drive those investments. So, are your shovels ready? All right, I'm glad to hear it. We have committed to building Ontario together with infrastructure investments of $144 billion over 10 years. But why are we doing this? Because ours is a government of neighborhoods, small towns, and rural communities. The kind of community that I come from and that I have had the privilege of representing for over 16 years. You may have heard at Roma, Premier Ford made the commitment that our government will build rural Ontario together. We have, we are, and we will continue to do so. I've heard from many municipalities, many of you here in this room, that you need sustainable funding to support the building of roads and bridges in your communities. Stephen Crawford, I know he's somewhere in the room. Wave, Stephen, if you're there. You are right here at the front. My parliamentary assistant and I heard this from over 60 delegations last year at the Associations of Municipalities of Ontario. The importance of the Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, OCIF. That is why last fall, our government confirmed the almost $200 million this year for OCIF. This is an investment in that long and winding road of rebuilding Ontario together, allowing our municipal partners to move forward with local infrastructure projects while providing them with the flexibility to address their local needs. I'm proud to tell this gathering that we fulfilled our commitment to predictable and stable infrastructure funding for small, rural, and northern municipalities. And just last month, Premier Ford and I joined Norm Miller, MPP for Parry Sound Muskoka, to announce this year's OCIF funding for all 424 eligible municipalities. For those of you who may not have had the pleasure of hearing Premier Ford's speech at Roma, I can tell you the moment he confirmed OCIF funding, there was a round of applause. Our government understands how important OCIF is, and we delivered. This is stable and predictable funding that communities have been asking for. This year's investments are the same amount we invested last year, even as we face a $9 billion deficit with debt service charges of over $12 billion annually. It makes me cry, but along with ongoing fiscal pressures, and as we look at ending hallway healthcare, plus all the funding challenges facing small and medium-sized hospitals, we know that OCIF is one of the best ways that we can support our local economic development. So to all of our 420 municipal partners and to everyone here today, I ask again, are your shovels ready? All right, this is good. Most of you know Ontario entered into the 10-year Investing in Canada infrastructure program known as ICIP. OCIF, ICIP, there's a lot of acronyms. But this is a trilateral partnership between Ontario, the federal government, and our municipal partners. Last year at AMO, I committed to having all 4 streams opened by the end of the year, and I'm happy to report we did just that. Rural and Northern, transit infrastructure, community, culture, and recreation, and Green Stream. We're all opened, and we are nominating projects to the federal government as fast as we possibly can. By the end of August last year, Ontario had nominated 350 rural and northern along with transit infrastructure projects to the federal government. We opened up the community, culture, and recreation and Green Stream. And I want to take a moment to talk about the community, culture, and recreation stream. The demand for the stream was incredible, overwhelming, and daunting, actually. We received close to 1,200 applications worth over $11 billion in projects from every corner of the province. Our officials, and this includes engineers, planners, designers, finance, and other experts across government, are now meticulously going through all of these applications. And I wish we had a $9 billion surplus instead of a $9 billion deficit, because if that were the case, we would be able to make a lot more projects become a reality. And yes, it is a $1 billion fund, but Ontario only has $320 million to commit to this stream, with the federal government committing $400 million and partners such as municipal governments coming in with the rest. We also have the first round for Green Stream projects. This is for small, rural, and northern communities. The application deadline was at the end of January. This stream was also incredibly oversubscribed. It is a $200 million program that our officials are also reviewing, and I hope to be able to make those nominations to the federal government in the spring. But the two streams that I'm really excited about for everyone here at OGRA is the rural and northern and the transit infrastructure stream, both of which have a real focus on roads and bridges and transit all across Ontario. Every day, constituents and local elected officials approach me and contact my office about what our government plans to do to help support our local infrastructure priorities. Once those shovels are in the ground, these investments will have a significant positive impact on the regional economic development, improving our ability to attract investment and compete for jobs. As I'm sure you've heard me say before, Ontario has nominated more than 350 projects to the federal government under ICIP for final funding approval. This includes the 144 road, bridge, air, and marine infrastructure projects, with over 200 public transit projects for a total provincial investment of more than $480 million. We're making an historic investment in infrastructure while working to maximize the federal funding available to Ontario so we can build and improve the infrastructure projects that are important to all of us. I remain very optimistic that the federal government will provide their final written letter of approval soon so we can put shovels in the ground to get these projects built. As we continue the rebuilding of Ontario's infrastructure together, we are doing more than ever before as a province. Our government is also investing $2.3 billion in our provincial highway network to resurface and expand roads to help get goods and people moving. Our government is looking at infrastructure from a big picture lens, not community against community, but as one very big, very great province. With that said, we also need to let everyone in the province know that there is a large demand for training and developing a new era of skilled professionals, because closing the skills gap matters. We know OGRA and its members will need more skilled workers to close the gap and make sure these infrastructure projects get built. And the good news here at Good Roads is that this is one of the factors that government can do something about. We have created a skilled trades marketing campaign, I'm sure some of you have seen it on the TV commercials, to encourage more young people to consider a rewarding career, not a second best option, but a first choice for a great long-term career in exciting and good paying jobs. Help us spread the word. We are investing in 3 programs to introduce high school students to the skilled trades. There's the Ontario Youth Apprenticeship Program, the Specialist High Skills Major Program, and a pre-apprenticeship program supporting 1,800 placements this year alone. Thanks to our government's early actions to modernizing our skilled trades and apprenticeship systems, apprenticeship registrations are up 14% in the first 18 months of our mandate. These new apprenticeships will work to build our communities together, because communities are where we live, where we raise our children, where we work, and where we play. Tight-knit communities continue to be an important part of my life. I was born and raised in Keynote, as Dave said, a town I still call home. And I know the power of a close-knit community, one that watches out for each other to get things done. That's the can-do spirit that I bring to my portfolio as Minister of Infrastructure. It is that can-do spirit of getting things done that has made broadband and cellular connectivity a top priority of mine. My staff often comments that when I walk in the office, the first thing I ask them is, how was their day? And the next thing I ask them is, where is my broadband? And I want to let everyone know here that I understand what it means not to be connected to the greater world, especially in 2020. That's why one of the first announcements I made as Infrastructure Minister, along with Premier Ford, was the release of the province's first broadband and cellular action plan, Up to Speed. It includes a $315 million investment over 5 years. Our plan will leverage private sector and partner funding with the potential to expand access to up to 220,000 homes and businesses. An update on this project will be announced in the near future, and that is terrific news. So stay tuned, stay connected. As we all know, families and farmers, small businesses, students, and everyone in our small, rural, and remote communities need to be connected to thrive in the 21st century digital economy. I want to thank OGRA for its contribution to communities across our great province. I especially want to thank Rick Kester. Where's Rick? Who is stepping down as association president for his work this past year. So I thank Rick. And thank you to another Rick for the contributions in advancing the interests of your members through advocacy and training initiatives. And congratulate Rick Harms, who will be the new incoming president. Okay, there we go. We have the Ricks over here. So thank you and welcome. I look forward to working with you and your association over the next year. I want to look forward to working with all of you to invest in smart infrastructure, growing the economy, and making life better for everyone in Ontario. Because investing in infrastructure is more than just about bricks, mortar, and steel. It's about investing in people and their families. It's our job creators, in our workers. It's about the truck drivers who drive on newly paved roads to deliver products and goods. It's about our children who can take reliable and safe transit to get to school and back home every day. These are the kind of people we are fighting for every single day, but we know we can't do it alone. We need your help. You are the leaders, the builders, and the visionaries. We want to team up with you to deliver the high-quality infrastructure that our communities rely and depend upon. And we need your help to lay the foundation for a better future. With your help, our communities will continue to grow and thrive into this 21st century. With your help, we will build infrastructure that benefits and lasts for generations. And as I hope you can tell from my time here with you today, and some of the commitments and highlights we are working on as your government, we are building and moving as fast as we possibly can. If we could move faster, believe me, we would move faster. This long and winding road, the road that is rebuilding of Ontario's infrastructure, is a big task. But together, we will build a more prosperous Ontario. We will get the job done. We will and are putting the province on the right track. With your help, there will be more good roads that lead us to our families and communities this year, next year, and for many, many years to come. So one last time, are your shovels ready? Good, because it's time to get the shovels in the ground. Thank you so much for inviting me here today and letting us work with you as a government to get the job done. Thank you, Dave. Can I go now? Are you the new Rick?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, I'll go out.
Okay. Thank you very much, Minister Scott. We really do appreciate your leadership and your advocacy on our behalf for infrastructure. It's truly the foundation of our communities, and we certainly appreciate the government's response. And I can tell you, we're all ready. We have been ready, and we are ready with our shovels. So let's get going. That concludes our morning session. OGRA is pleased to have set aside the next 30 minutes to give you time to visit our exhibitors. Coffee stations have been set up in the exhibit halls, generously sponsored by the Canadian Association of Petroleum Producers. Before we break, I would like to remind everyone there'll be a few technological demonstrations on the lobby level of the hotel. Today, Gaddick will be showing off their autonomous delivery vehicle in the valet parking area. If you haven't already done so, please go to Salon A and register for the tour. Tomorrow, Lime e-scooter will be showcasing the latest in personal mobility in the down in the lobby level of the hotel. Concurrent workshops begin at 11. Please refer to your conference app for locations, and the afternoon session will be back here at 2 o'clock. Please enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.